protecting warrior, or a furious, well-armed assassin. Varian's trait, Heroic Strike, automatically empowers a basic attack to deal extra damage. Once used, each of his basic attacks lower Heroic Strike's cooldown by a small amount. Varian's first ability, Lion's Fang, unleashes a shockwave that slows and deals damage to enemies along a straight line. His parry ability nullifies incoming basic attacks from enemy heroes. It lasts for a short period and holds up to 2 charges. Like all warriors, Varian is known to charge fearlessly into battle. Upon activation, he rushes towards his enemy, slowing them and dealing damage. Varian has 3 different heroic options reflecting each of the warrior specializations in World of Warcraft. Each heroic has a passive effect and will alter his health, damage, or attack speed when chosen. His first heroic, Taunt, is a versatile defensive ability. When activated, Varian calls out a nearby enemy hero, forcing them to attack him for a short period. Next is Colossus Smash. With a swing of Charlemagne, Varian deals heavy damage to an enemy and inflicts the vulnerable status, increasing their damage taken for a short time. Varian's final option is to unleash the Twin Blades of Fury. This heroic's effect is passive and dramatically increases the speed at which basic attacks refresh his trait, Heroic Strike. In addition, his attacks will increase his movement speed. Varian's heroic defines his playstyle. The Taunt heroic makes Varian a warrior for his team by increasing his health, but lowering his attack speed. Taunt enemies to force them to attack Varian, then activate his parry ability and negate their attacks. Use Taunt to lock down foes and give your team a chance to secure a kill. Twin Blades of Fury turns Varian into a sustained melee assassin, increasing the speed of his attacks while lowering their damage. Stick to enemies using his Charge and Lion's Fang abilities, and his blades will do the rest. Colossus Smash makes Varian a powerful burst assassin by increasing the damage of his attacks, but it will also lower his total health. Colossus Smash inflicts the vulnerable status along with its damage, so with a little coordination, this single swing from Varian can turn the tide of an entire fight. Varian isn't only about heroics. His talents bring an incredible amount of utility to the battle. At level 13, he can select between 3 banners that buff nearby teammates. He can grant bonus movement speed with the banner of Stormwind, decrease the damage allies take with the banner of Ironforge, or increase ability power with the banner of Dalaran. Select talents that counter your enemy's tactics. Mortal Strike, for example, can shut down a strong support. Facing a lot of enemy shields, take Shattering Throw and break them down. As the first multi-class hero, Varian brings a new way of playing to Heroes of the Storm. Since his role is decided through your talent choices, your enemy will never truly know what your plan is until you're facing off on the field of battle. The High King of the Alliance will arrive soon, bringing a whole new level of strategy with him. Excited for Varian and our BlizzCon reveals? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to Heroes of the Storm here on YouTube, and we'll see you in the Nexus.
Welcome back, everybody, to the HGC Eastern Clash. We just saw MVP Black defeat the last Chinese team in the tournament, and now they are going up once again against Team Tempest. I'm Calder. With me are Jehao and Wolf. Guys, what do you think about the last series?
Well, I mean, MVP Black definitely should have had an easier time against CE. You would have to expect they were the dominant team. They're the favorites going into this tournament. Everyone was saying, but it's the story of MVP Black in this tournament is not dominance, but a story of struggles for each and every opponent they faced. You know, we started off against Deadly Kittens. They didn't have a clean series there, struggling last night. Now CE, they took a game, and each game didn't look convincing for Black, so I have to call them the underdogs going into this one.
What about you, Gerald? What do you think now that they're going up against Tempest again, who they already faced once in the winner bracket and lost?
For what it's worth, it was a 3-2 series in favor of Tempest, but obviously MVP Black was the favorite, as Wolf alluded to, and Tempest had a tough time against the upper echelon of the Korean League, and that's the thing, is now all of a sudden, you know, they played very well against L5 earlier, and despite that loss, you got to give them the upper hand, I think, in this matchup.
I was actually a bit surprised myself looking at MVP Black coming into the tournament. Everybody kept saying they are the ones that are going to win it. We asked L5, how do you beat them? And they said, well, we're going to need a bit of a miracle to take them down. Now it's L5 that are waiting in the grand final for the next opponent. And it just feels like MVP Black, even after saying they have their sights already on BlizzCon, is just struggling way too much here.
Yeah, I mean, this feels like this tournament in general has not been the redemption story for Black they were looking for. They fell early in the midseason brawl. They're defending Eastern Clash champions. They wanted to repeat that performance heading towards BlizzCon. That was their goal, is to look dominant, and they were basically just saying, we're coming for you, Fnatic, pointing fingers already before the tournament even started. And this is not the same Black that we heard, we interviewed before the tournament started, the same Black that dominated HGC Korea. It's a different one, and it doesn't look to be quite as strong as we expected.
Well, they are still in the tournament and have, of course, a chance. We're going to take another quick look at our schedule before we're heading into the next match here between MVP Black and Tempest. So we started the day off with Tempest versus L5 in the winner bracket. A close series, but at the end of the day, it was L5 that prevailed. And of course, just a few moments ago, we had CE going up against MVP Black. And the Chinese team looked a lot better than expected here.
And, you know, one of the things that I think that goes to the point that we're going to talk about here is the meta, right? Sometimes teams show up to these international tournaments, they have the meta within their own region, and then there's like an inter-tournament meta that kind of develops as well. And China's always been unique in what they bring to these tournaments, sometimes more unique like Super Perfect Team, but then we see things like out of CE where it was more counter drafts, more of the CC focused lockdown, which seemed to be something that MVP Black struggled with. And I think that's something when we talk about Fnatic in general, they seem to have a lot figured out. And before this tournament started, Gilead asked in the interviews multiple teams, did you guys watch the Western Clash? If so, what did you make of it? And the same thing that was said at mid-season, the same thing that was said now, is that they still feel like they're figuring out what the current meta is.
Yeah, well, of course, we talk a lot about MVP, but let's talk also a bit about Tempest and have another closer look at the lineup. Tempest coming into the tournament, and they were very confident in the interviews. They said that going up against the other Korean teams that they lost to in the regular season would be tough, but they feel they can make it happen and they can also win. They have proven it in the winner bracket against MVP Black, but now they have to face them again. What do you think, Wolf? Do they have a chance of taking them down once more?
I feel like this is the real high-stakes rematch of what we saw in Sweden last year. It's different rosters on both sides, but you have to remember these teams are rivals in a sense. Sign now playing against his former teammates, playing on the squad that beat them back in Sweden. This team looks to be cleaner right now, but there are clear weak points. And I think you can point to H82 in the solo lane and Sign's hero pool. That's something that Black, who's one of the strongest drafting teams in the world, is looking to exploit.
And to further that point is that they did...
Someone needs to wake him up.
This is Hong Kono in a nutshell. His attitude right there, right? This is one of the most infectious person. Like, obviously there's a language barrier, but you can tell the people around him are always, he's such a lighthearted person, such a fun person to be around. His style, everything about this guy is something to appreciate. You can't tell out there when he's asleep, but
Going full resident sleeper against
Yeah, a
MVP
little
Black
bit.
here.
I mean, he certainly is meditating in his own way, I suppose. But the team doesn't seem phased by it. You see Hyde sitting next to him with just a normal calm look on his face, getting ready to go into the map selection and preparing for this series. But again, I feel like if you target Science Hero Pool in the draft, that's how you start to pick apart this team. And even though I think the execution overall has been cleaner, the decision-making for when to team fight, where to team fight has been cleaner than Black overall. I think Black, if they win this series, they win it in draft.
Well, we're going to take another close look at Black, of course, as well. MVP Black so far in the tournament struggling, but they are still in the run, and they can redeem themselves now against Tempest. MVP Black hailed as the best Korean team as we were heading into the tournament, but I can tell you one thing, after they just won against the Chinese team, all of the players walked backstage and not a single one of them looked happy. They all looked very concerned, as if they were about to say, this is not what we expected this to be, and if we struggle already against CE, how do we fare up now against Tempest and maybe later on L5?
Reset didn't look confident in the interview. Rich sure had his carry moments on Mouthail, for example, but overall, I think you have to rate, based on performance in this tournament alone, MVP Black is number 3 for the Korean teams. They were the first to drop to the loser bracket. They struggled against Soul Torturers. You could argue they lost that first game. Then, of course, struggling against CE. Even though it was a 3-1 score, that score doesn't tell the struggle of what we saw from Black. I think one of the weaknesses of Black in terms of team fighting and in-game is underestimating opponents. Trying to take 3v5 fights or take 4v5 fights, taking fights down a talent tier, taking fights out of position. It's almost as if this team just assumes they're the mechanically best team in the world because for so long they were, but no longer the case. The other teams here at this tournament have improved their skills. The gap is not as wide as it once was.
And I think the big part about that was Rich in that series against Tempest earlier is that I used the word stubbornness in terms of I can play these high impact heroes like the Medivh, like the Illidan. I can make them work. I can make them work until you don't. And in that series, there was 2 games of Medivh and 3 games of Illidan. I think there were moments where each one of those struggled. Since then, he's pulled back from the Illidan. We've seen more Arthas. We even saw a Dahaka game. Things like that, I think, are things to keep an eye out for.
It was actually really interesting since during the series I also talked to some of the European players and they more or less all agreed that this is not quite the MVP Black that they expected, especially considering that going up against CE, it was a Chinese team that played with a sub. It wasn't even the full lineup. So Black definitely has to step it up now if they want to take down Tempest. And we can take a closer look at also the Battlegrounds now, especially, of course, the first map that we're going to head into.
All right, Battlefield of Eternity. A brave pick because it will be on the side of Tempest as they will take the first map. Not only do you pick into Battlefield of Eternity, one of Black's historically best maps, but you also do so knowing that they will have first pick. A very bold choice. Perhaps they just want to get it out of the way, or they think because they've seen so many maps of Black here that they actually have a counter strategy prepared.
One thing that we credited was Tempest drafting, forcing Black into a hammer pick, an old school option for them that did not go well. Tempest defeated Black during their first series.
I'm actually really excited now to see how Tempest is going to do here, since especially when we were looking at the winner bracket final against L5, they looked multiple times as if they could be the ones claiming the series and move on to the grand final. And they must be hungry to just show once again that they can beat MVP Black. And if anything, the last series that MVP Black played should have given them even more confidence.
Absolutely, and it's been a long time. Remember, people hailed Tempest as the greatest team of all time. They said Black was over. When in that 5th game on Towers of Doom, you and Dread were casting Keldor. When Tempest won that final game, it was dominant with no deaths. That was a long time ago. People said that was when Black's era ended.
Whoa.
But it never really did. Tempest never had the same performance after that, and this is their first chance to repeat it.
Yeah, and already when we're going into the draft here, we start with 2 very standard bans that we have seen over this tournament so many times. Genji and Oriel both eliminated. And Black with a Tarsadar pick already highlighting a bit that we might see that Illidan coming into play again. But Tempest reacting immediately, J-Ho.
Yeah, Tempest, this is something they've actually repeatedly run on this Battleground in particular, and they tend to always do it with a Tyrael. And that's the biggest thing about this composition is that they have that added protection. They have the Tyrael there to deal with a lot. On the other side, you know, we see MVP Black with the Tassadar. It's no surprise. That is Sake's hero locked in. But a lot of times we'll see the potential Greymane or the Vala in this slot. They both have pros and cons here, but they've got to be a little bit afraid of what that Abathur brings. And I think that's one of the biggest question marks I think that we'll see after the second ban phase. But I think picking in their damage dealer here will definitely be indicative of where they go, and instead they go Tracer.
They played her before in this battleground, and with great success, actually. So at this point, Wolf, what would you expect here for them? Do you think this is now more the style of drafting that we've seen from MVP Black before? Because in the series against CE, they definitely deviated from that.
They definitely deviated from it, and this is an old pick. It was, remember, back in 2016, Kyocho would run the Tracer. A different world now, he'll be on the Rhaegar, but this is a draft that Tempest also likes to run, so very Korean style to run this on this map. Moving away from the Tracer pick, though, my big concern for Tempest is, again, this looks like it's going to be Sign on the Tyrael. We've seen with this exact draft for Tempest, not in this tournament, but in HGC Korea, the move away, having Honkono, who's falling back in his chair, having Honkono on the Tyrael, having Sign on the Tracer. So this is partially why we see Black pick up the Tracer now, and now they won't be able to have that same swap, so Sign will have to be on the Tyrael. He hasn't shown good performances on this hero this tournament.
Can I just point out how funny it is to me that Honkono is just sitting there chilling and absolutely... I mean, he's talking to his teammates, but he just doesn't care who he's playing at this point. So it's like, guys, it's going to be fine. I'm going to carry us. Black is going to be easy.
Well, when I see this draft, obviously the Greymane takes away the clone potential. And if you were looking to potentially go into an Illidan, I would reserve that for the last spot. With the Tassadar on the other side and the Tracer already picked up, you have to fear the potential Cassia pickup, which is a really good counter towards the Illidan. So if they're going to do that, I'd like to see them do it later in the draft. I don't think they have to fear as much on the side of MVP Black. There's a lot of good secondary options they can go into. So I'd love to see a support here. We might potentially see an Artanis again that could come out here, which is H82's hero, which also Battlefield of Eternity, one of his best battlegrounds.
There's a few other heroes that they would run with a composition like this. For example, the Zeratul is something that we've seen in the past. Li Ming is a given with this comp, whether they run the Illidan, the Artanis, or the Zeratul. Li Ming is the staple to have that extra poke. It is going to be the Malfurion that comes in now as a support, so they're going to save that 5th pick for flex. As you say, if you're going to bring the Illidan, if you're going to bring the Artanis, don't give Black an opportunity to counter it here with their final picks and their Warrior pick, which could definitely directly influence how much that's viable.
Yeah, at this point, Black now with the last 2 picks, they still need the Warrior at the front. And we have been also talking about the Artanis pick on this map a lot. The damage that you can push onto the Immortal to claim the objective even faster is absolutely fantastic. And we have seen some incredible Artanis play already at this tournament.
Yeah, you have to remember the swamps aren't necessarily the only reason why you pick him. As you say, he does so much with his amateur opponent. With the Abathur symbiote on him, the attack speed buffs can really make him wear that down. And you can have 3 members on, defending, slowing down the Immortal of Black, while you have the Abathur symbiote helping Artanis solo the Immortal. It's definitely a viable option. The swaps are going to be difficult to pull off against the comp of Black, and here comes Rich's Chen. He's going to try to dominate the solo lane here and dive into Li Ming.
And they've done really well with Chen so far. The question is, though, when we're talking about the other side, do you need some lockdown for Tracer, which at this point, outside of Malfurion's roots, just doesn't exist for them?
They don't, and this is the part where it allows you to have that flexibility. If you do end up going the Artanis, who do you really prioritize? You just become a full-on objective style hero. You're not doing much to the Chen. You're not interrupting that. Murden doesn't care about you. Tracer, you're never going to get on the Tracer.
Never, never.
And so that's the hardest part now, is that you might go into it as kind of a fallback option, but is that optimal? And I think that's the hardest part. Tempest, they did a good job in the draft, but did they dig themselves a little bit too big of a hole?
I mean, the Illidan is still an option, but against Murden, Chen, with the Tracer there, it's going to be difficult to actually make that happen. And you're going to have trouble in the soul lane against Chen as well. I don't really think that there's a great pick here for Tempest. They're going to have to pick one of their remaining options. Zeratul, let's not forget, can be powerful. Who are you ganking? So many escapes on the side of MVP Black. You can't really gank any of the heroes. They have Tracer, no Rhaegar, no Tassadar, of course not. So does it feel like there's a perfect pick here? They're going to go with the Sonya instead. This can be powerful for the Battleground. Does have good sustain, but...
yeah.
I mean,
I actually like the Sonya pick more than anything else that
I
we've thought about so far. First of all, she's going to do very well on a solo lane, since Abathur can always help out throughout the entire matchup, so that's going to put extra pressure on Chen. And as you said, Wolf, she puts pressure onto the Immortal as well. And if you go into the Poison Spear, you can really start to threaten Tracer too.
If you can land that spear on a Tracer, it's a huge chunk. You go directly into that into Slam. Also, it gives you that one stun that you now have for Chen. If he gets on that backside, you now have that spear available to you.
I think that's the reason why she's chosen over something like an Artanis. She said Chen doesn't care about Artanis. You can't interrupt his brew. The spear gives you the opportunity to do that. Hitting Tracer is going to be so difficult, but if H82 can make it happen, he'll make a bigger name perhaps in this first game than he ever has on the Artanis.
Well, game number 1, ladies and gentlemen, is starting up on Battlefield of Eternity as we have Team Tempest going up against MVP Black. And all the way to the left, we have Tempest now with Tyrael, Sonya, Abathur, and Li Ming and Malfurion as their comp.
The first thing you'll notice is the role swap here, H82 on the Abathur, lockdown on his Sonya. We'll talk about that more as, of course, MVP Black will be spawning in the red. It's reset on that Tracer socket on the Tassadar, as you mentioned. So going into this one, it's really interesting because Lockdown was so famous for his Falstad. The only time back on the old Tempest roster in summer 2016, you'd see him switch off of ranged carry, off of the, very oftentimes we saw Kael'Thas, the Falstad, was when he played Sonya in the solo lane, and he's so damn good at it, Calder.
Now there's one thing that I wanted to ask you overall when we talk about the Korean teams, because as you've been mentioning before, Tempest came into the tournament supposedly the weakest of the Korean teams, at this point already threatened here up the top with Lockdown. But MVP Black, if you look at how Tempest played, what expectations people had towards the team, they lost their matches against MVP Black and L5 very early in the season when the lineup, the roster was still quite new. Do you think that since then they made a big leap, or is this just a breakout performance by them simply because they thrive in the tournament environment?
To be honest, I feel like it's a breakout performance from Tempest. When you look at how well H82's been able to perform on the Artanis, we're seeing better swaps than he even had in regular league play. We're seeing really incredible performances by Sign on the ETC. He wasn't really showing us. It feels like they've just gotten some extra confidence here. They've taken a different approach to the draft. And when you look at players like H82 who've never played international play, Hunkono is back on the role that's flashy, the one that he's most famous for, the DPS role. It feels like they're just so much comfortable here in an actual international tournament with a live audience.
Hunkono at the top lane already showing his skills here, dodging the Stormbolt, making sure that there is no kill on the side of MVP Black just yet. Now keep in mind that when we're looking at talents, we already have a bit of an idea what we're going to see. The Lightning Bond for Rhaegar, the typical talent to be taken here for the extra pressure against the Immortal. But also when we are looking at Abathur now, we are not seeing the Toxic Nest build that was played in the past game here. So it's not all about slowing down rotations and laying traps. It's more about empowering Sonya in particular, going straight into the Symbiote build.
Yeah, they want Lockdown to be able to kind of carry here. Let's see how well he does against the Tracer. Nearly gets the spear there. Hunkono will be killed by the early Pulse Bomb, however. Resets very low, but again, too much protection coming out here. It's actually Kyocha who's blocking him off now for the dive.
Lockdown with a spin to win. The reset is low, and he's down. Tracer eliminated, and Sonya gets out, but Height might not be so lucky.
Okay, let's see if they can try to turn this. It's just so difficult, even with the symbiote here onto Sign. It is going to be advantage MVP Black with this. MVP did commit a lot of resources to this. There was a lot of Abathur soak going on in the bot lane at the same time, though, so EXP is still relatively even here.
We still have, of course, Abathur with the at least possibility to not only body soak, but also just simply jump on a wave and make sure that with the symbiote he soaks some extra experience. The whole attempt here is to get to level 10 on even terms with MVP Black. If they can get ahead, that would, of course, even more fantastic. But with an Abathur composition, you always are willing to take certain losses in the early stages of the game.
I actually really like that we see third wind here for Tist as well. He can be hyper aggressive, and when Sonya tries to wear down his health, he can just stay out of the battle for a little while. There's not that much range damage. There's not a lot of ways to make sure that his trait doesn't proc. So when he's out of damage, he'll heal so quickly. So if he dives in deep, and we'll see what build he decides to go with after this, but if he dives in hyper deep, especially later on with the stuns, takes a lot of damage. He doesn't need the Ancestral. That could be saved for Chen, perhaps even Tracer if things get dicey. Then he comes back into the fight, back at full health regardless because of that extra healing.
And at this point, MVP Black is just trying to push through the top lane with the first Immortal. Ideally, they would abuse the fact that Tempest runs the Abathur that we already mentioned a bit earlier. So the more they can get now, the farther they can get ahead at this point, the better their chances for the second Immortal in particular. Chen already moving through the bot lane, getting experience here, but up to the top, like goes through the entire wall, drops the fountain, takes the sustain away from the lane, and Rich is still busy. But I like that we saw on the side of Tempest the camp being taken before the move to the top happened, just simply because they make sure that Chen does not go through the entire lane. Abathur would have really struggled there.
Exactly. Abathur would probably be having to take a little bit of a step back behind the fort if that camp hadn't been taken. Now MVP Black, though, after the clear, can go ahead and take the neutral camp. It's taken against them as well. Tafstar, there's nothing he can do about that with the clear time that Lockdown and friends have up in the top lane. But Black still has their Shaman camp available to time out with the next Immortal phase. So that's something that Tempest won't have because they had to use that tool early on to sort of negate the pressure of what we saw there from Chen in the solo lane. Still, trying to stay even in EXP is Tempest currently. They're doing a great job of it.
Now also a few talents to point out here, as we are seeing Sign in a bit of trouble. We have on level 1 for Chen, Grounding Brood taken over the elusive Brawler, so way more afraid of the abilities on the side of Sonya and Li Ming, of course, in particular, when we're talking about Chen. And now on level 7, going straight into the Boulder Flavor. Pretty normal to go for the extra shield there, whereas Korea has already shown that outside of these two talents, they like to spec way more into the flying kick than other regions.
Absolutely, especially with Rich, but Sign is going to nearly get picked here by the Parting Gift coming out from Reset. Wants to go for the kill here onto Lockdown now. He's got Full Fury. A risky endeavor. Also notice that the way that Tempest is approaching this is trying to, in their builds, deal with Rich's dive. The roots coming out at 7 here from Alfurion. You have the missiles coming out for Li Ming, the Force Armor to protect when Rich dives, and you can proc just here. And now Rich finds himself stuck in the root here, goes for the dive, but it's very likely he goes down, and that means a reset here now for Honkono, looking for the chase here onto Tist, and they will get the double.
They go for the double, and they want even more, but that's fantastic for them now. With the Strangling Vines on level 7, reducing the healing power onto the hero is such a fantastic tool if you're going for burst. And this is one of the things that Sonya, in combination with Li Ming, does absolutely best here. That's the end of Chen and Muradin, and all of a sudden, without level 10, without the copy, Tempest is the team that gets ahead when we're talking about the second Immortal.
Absolutely. It's going to be a slight lead